In this unit, we're going to begin on the topic of energy. So first thing we need to ask are, what are different energy resources and what do we use them for? Well, of course, we know that modern life today, especially in the United States, well, we just run on energy. Everything we need, from heating and cooling to transportation to food prep, all the way through education and medicine, is fueled by energy. And so most of these things are run on irreplaceable fossil fuels. These are non-renewable sources of energy, including oil, coal, and gas. However, there are also other alternative forms of energy as well that are used to supplement these irreplaceable fossil fuels, including hydropower, as well as nuclear power. But increasingly, and as we'll discuss in this lecture, and as you'll do in the readings and online supplementary videos, you'll get to understand how increasingly we are relying on using alternative energy sources like wind, solar, and other renewable forms of energy to be part of our standard energy supply. So digging into a little bit more detail on those energy uses, here is a table from your textbook that shows you in kilowatt hours per year how much we are using for all of these different things that we encounter on a day-to-day basis, including computers, television, different light bulbs, dishwashers, clothes dryer, and refrigerator. And so by and large, we see that a large chunk of our daily energy uses actually has to do with refrigeration and storing our food. So here we are introducing the kilowatt hour per year as a measurement of how much energy each of these different items use, but we need to understand some basic definitions. So what is energy? Well, energy is the capacity to do work. So what is work? Work is the application of force over distance, and we measure work in units called joules. And so therefore, energy is the capacity to do this application of force over distance or to do this work. Power is the rate of energy flow or the rate of work done. So for example, this is often depicted and reported in watts, and that is 1 joule per second. So moving away from standard definitions, let's understand a little bit more about those fossil fuels we were talking about. Fossil fuels supply most of our energy in the United States right now, and also that's very similar to other industrialized nations. So a vast majority of our energy comes from fossil fuels, including coal, natural gas, and petroleum outlined here. Oil makes up 37% of the supply, while natural gas, which is also called methane, as well as coal, follow very closely behind. Right now in the United States, only about 11% of our power is generated by renewable sources of energy like wind, hydro, geothermal, and solar. And we will get to discuss in coming slides how the trend is now shifting toward more renewable sources. But for now, let's just take a look at two different sectors. We've got wind energy and solar energy. And here we have the expected versus observed changes in global capacity of wind and solar energy. So here we have years from 1997 through 2015 for both of our charts. And we have the installed capacity in gigawatts, both for wind, which goes up to 500 gigawatts, and for solar, which goes up to 150. So please note that these two y-axes are different from each other, meaning that the capacity, the installed capacity for each of these renewable resources is different. So here we have different colors outlining the actual installation in red, what's projected by Greenpeace from 2010, and other agencies in other colors here. So by and large, looking at wind, we see an uptick at about 2007, 2008 in the actual installation for wind turbines. That is trailing very close behind what was projected by Greenpeace in 2010. Let's shift over here to solar and see how we're doing. Again, we see an increase in installations in about 2007, 2009, and then really skyrocketing off to really high installation rates from about 2010 till 2013, when I imagine data was finalized and being collected. And so by and large, we see that solar installations are actually exceeding what has been projected for installations, which is really good news. So the question is, how much energy do we use, and in what sectors do we use the most? So the largest share of the energy in the United States is consumed by industry. Residential and commercial customers roughly make up about 41%, and transportation consumes the remaining 28%. So here's a pie chart representing the different sectors that soak up the energy that we generate in the United States. And we see by and large that industrial uses are pretty large, and taking up second place is transportation. The amount of coal that we have available to us for use is actually greater than what we can use. When we're talking about a global scale, the world's coal deposits are enormous and about 10 times greater than conventional oil and gas resources combined. Almost all of the world's coal is actually found in North America, as well as Europe and Asia, and just 3 countries, US, Russia, and China, account for about 2/3 of all of the proven reserves, or all of the locations that we know have coal. Specifically here in the United States, a whole lot of it is concentrated in the Appalachian region due to the processes that form the coal in association with the mountains that we have here. So the total resource of this coal is estimated to be about 10 trillion metric tons. That's several thousand-year supply if we go off of rates of energy utilization that we have today. But of course, as we know, coal mining is a dirty and dangerous activity. It's not only dangerous for the environment, as we've discussed before, and we'll talk about a little bit more today, but it's also extremely dangerous for those coal miners who are in the coal mines doing the dirty work of extracting the coal. They make themselves susceptible to all sorts of maladies and diseases and higher risks of certain cancers. So here's a breakdown of those proven coal reserves by region. So almost all of the world's coal is located in North America, Europe, and Asia. And here we have a little bit that is found in Africa and the Middle East, but really not that much. North America has a whole lot when we're talking about the proven coal reserves on a global scale. And so here is another depiction of mountaintop removal. We talked about mountaintop removal on the last lecture that we had together, but here is just to reiterate to you the especially damaging technique that we employ here in Appalachia to extract that coal. We take off the entire tops of mountainsides and extract the coal that is embedded in different layers, and keep moving down and down the mountain until we play out the entire mountainside. Here's a video from 60 Minutes that's going to discuss a little bit of the environmental disasters and catastrophes associated with some of the mining activity that Tennessee Valley Authority has done here in our region.
We burn so much coal in this country for electricity that every year that process generates, listen to this number, 130 million tons of waste. Most of it is coal ash, and it contains some nasty stuff. Environmental scientists tell us that concentrations of mercury, arsenic, lead, and other toxic metals are considerably higher in coal ash than in ordinary soil. When coal ash is disposed of, often dumped into wet ponds, there are nearly 500 of them across the country, and in those cases, the ash can pose health risks to nearby communities.
We get about 48%, nearly half of the electricity in this country from coal.
Jim Rower is one of the top lobbyists for the power industry.
Coal is going to be around for a long time.
And we really can't get rid of coal.
We
And it-
shouldn't get rid of coal. We've
Well,
got,
well, should or shouldn't, we can't. And coal makes waste. Would you say that the industry has done a good job of disposing of the coal ash waste?
we can do better.
Does that mean no?
Well, we had a Kingston spill.
That's Kingston, Tennessee, where last December, a giant retention pool of coal ash buckled under the weight of 5 decades of waste.
All the power line fencing had been knocked out.
1 billion gallons of muck shot into the Emery River like a black tsunami,
One person in the house, he's alive.
engulfing homes, uprooting trees,
Everything's gone.
and throwing fish out of the water.
No, don't eat the fish, please.
Residents woke up to an apocalyptic moonscape of ash bergs everywhere.
This stuff is just sitting there steaming.
The spill was 100 times larger than the Exxon Valdez, and it was all coal ash.
You'd never heard of coal ash before Kingston?
Never,
Never.
never.
Wasn't a problem.
Well, it was a problem, we just didn't know. The problem is, where do you put all that stuff? Here, the Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, dumped up to 1,000 tons of coal ash every day into a wet pond near the plant, slowly amassing a waste cake 60 feet high. Some of the ingredients, according to the EPA, arsenic, lead, mercury, selenium, cadmium, and other toxic metals. You know, some people say that this is a poisoned meadow.
I guess that's, one way to describe it. It just doesn't belong here. It needs to come out.
Leo Francendisi is an environmental Mr. Fix-It. He was sent by the EPA to clean up this mess.
And in the wrong circumstances, coal ash is dangerous. Breathing it, that's dangerous.
The summer heat can bake the ash into a fine talc-like powder that can wreak havoc on your lungs. And this is all coal ash right along here. So while the government has never formally labeled coal ash a hazardous waste, it's being treated as such here.
Is that all coal ash?
Yeah.
As we left the site, we were scrubbed clean, as was our car. Oh my goodness, look at this.
Is it every car that goes through the site goes to this?
Gary Topmiller lives right on the river. He had a front row seat when the spill covered his dock.
Now, what the doctors did tell me was get out of there. And I said, I don't have any place to go.
So how do you live? You don't go out on the water.
No, we don't go out of the house.
From the house, he sees scientists collecting samples to analyze just how bad the water is. The river looks clear, but Topmiller says that's deceptive. Okay, this comes out of right here.
Right, they come right
And
off
I
the
should
top.
shake it?
Turn it upside down and start shaking it. And this is what the river looks like once that stuff gets suspended in it.
goodness.
And how they're going to get that all out of the river, I don't have an idea.
Most of his neighbors have packed up and left. Go down the river and you pass home after home that are deserted. The hubbub of children replaced by the hum of heavy machinery. Those left behind say the noise is one thing. What really infuriates them is executives from the power plant telling them that coal ash is as safe as dirt.
We have broken the trust of.
Anna Ray oversees environmental policy at the Tennessee Valley Authority, which is responsible for the spill. I asked her how toxic she thinks coal ash is.
I'd say that the constituents, the things that are in the coal ash, are the same things that are naturally occurring in soil and rock.
So is it like dirt? Would you say that? Would you say that sentence? That stuff is like dirt?
That ash material is higher than dirt in 2 areas, and that is arsenic and thallium. And we are monitoring those and the effect on the water.
So would you swim in this river today?
Yes, I would.
She later retracted, remembering the advisory.
We've advised people not to swim in the river where there's ash.
So as we just learned in that 60-minute expose, that coal burning releases huge amounts of air pollution as well as water pollution. This isn't even the extraction process. This is just the burning process of that coal. So every year, 1 billion tons of coal burned in the United States releases 1 trillion metric tons of carbon dioxide. This is about half of the industrial CO2 released by the United States each and every year. We also know that coal contains toxic impurities, including mercury, arsenic, chromium, and lead, and thallium, and all those other things that were highlighted in that expose piece that we just watched. All of this is released into the air during combustion. It is possible to make either gas or liquid fuel out of coal, but these processes are actually even dirtier and more expensive than burning the coal directly. Now, we do have some good news. Coal use is declining in the United States right now. Coal is fading quickly from our energy picture, and even industry leaders are shifting their focus to other renewable sources of energy. This is because there are recent improvements in technology, making other choices like gas and oil cheaper than coal. Coal actually has lower energy content than oil or gas. And so therefore, it would actually be less expensive for these industries to shift over from coal to other things like oil and gas. Only half a dozen new coal-fired power plants are now under construction or are in the planning stage. So really, there's not many more in the works, and even those that are activated right now are being considered for retrofitting to other purposes and other types of plants. So when the last of those plants, those coal burning plants, are finished, no other new projects are currently proposed for the foreseeable future. And federal regulations have a lot to do with this decline in industry's interest in erecting new plants. In 2012, the EPA mercury and air toxic standards proposed limitations on carbon emissions, making coal plants even more expensive to operate. So not only is it inefficient to burn this coal compared to other sources like natural gas or oil, but these regulations, including the 2012 EPA mercury regulation, actually made it more expensive for these coal-fired plants to operate. And so taking a look at the Tennessee Valley Authority explicitly, they are responsible for generating our power in this part of the state as well as other states. We can take a look at the portfolio of energy generation that they did in 2015, or excuse me, in 2005, compared with fiscal year 2020. So here we have a pie chart that shows how many trillions of watt hours that they generated, and the different sectors or sources of energy that supplied that power. So back in 2005, coal represented about 57% of the fossil, or 57% of the fuel to generate that power. Fast forward to 2020, coal is only 14% of the energy that they are generating. We can also see that that decline came into an expanse of nuclear power, as well as an expanse of hydroelectric power, and a huge explosion in gas, which went from 7% in the year 2005 all the way to 27% in the year 2020. A really interesting thing that TVA does is sometimes they generate more power than is demanded from their customers. Instead of wasting that excess energy, what they do is they pump water up this mountain called Raccoon Mountain. There's a reservoir sitting at the top of Raccoon Mountain. And so they take that excess energy to pump water from the Tennessee River and pump it all the way up to Raccoon Mountain. That way, when there's a energy demand that exceeds what they can supply with their normal means, they then convert that energy, or convert the potential energy of that water sitting at the top of the reservoir into kinetic energy and hydroelectric energy, and it runs down the mountain. So they have a bunch of ways that these energy sources are intermixed with each other, and ultimately that helps us save on our energy bills. We can ask the question, when will we run out of oil? And so here we have the annual production in gigabarrels per year from the year 1925 projected out to the year 2125. And here we have in different lines representing the actual production of oil in blue with the dots. We have conventional oil in green, non-conventional oil in light blue, gas liquids in orange, and then conventional and non-conventional combined in red. And we see by and large that oil production is going to, we've already exceeded the peak here. That occurred in the year about 2000. And so sitting right about here, this present day, we're already past the point of that peak oil production. So we've already used more than 1/2 trillion barrels, almost half of all proven oil reserves today. The remainder of that oil is expected to last about 41 years at current consumption rates. And our current consumption rate is about 30.7 barrels per year. And so it is estimated that we will probably run out of both conventional and non-conventional sources of oil probably around the year 2125 at normal consumption rates today. The domestic supply of oil is actually pretty limited. The US has used more than half of its technically recoverable petroleum resources, meaning that we've identified where they are in the United States. We figured out how to extract and recover that oil. And so far, we've taken out more than half of that recoverable oil. So at the rate of consumption in the year 2010, that's enough for about 4.2 years if we were to stop all of the imports of oil. So meaning that we really wouldn't even have enough oil to last us another 5 years if we were to rely on only domestic sources of oil. There are other US regions with potential for new oil discoveries. That includes the coast of California and the Arctic Ocean, as well as Grand Banks. But of course, there's always environmental impacts associated with recovering oil at new drill sites, even in the exploration phase. So concerns about environmental damage from drilling and oil spills like that of the Exxon Valdez in Alaska, as well as the Gulf oil spill in 2010. All of those make everybody extremely weary to open up other areas in the United States for oil exploration and drilling. Here we have a pie chart of the global reserves of oil by region. Again, these are proven oil reserves that we know about. There are 12 countries that account for about 90% of all known economically recoverable oil, and 7 of those countries are located in the greater Middle East. So Iraq, Iran, as well as Kuwait, the UAE, and then there are other regions like Venezuela and Saudi Arabia and even Canada. Note here that the United States on a global scale really doesn't have as much oil compared to other countries, and therefore this makes us pretty reliant upon foreign exports of oil. Deep water drilling poses extreme dangers. We have an image here of the Deepwater Horizon spill that occurred in the Gulf of Mexico in the year 2010. This is when there was a blowout in the well that was drilled into the bottom of the seafloor, and it was failed to be contained for nearly 90 days. For those 90 days, oil just gushed and gushed and gushed into the Gulf of Mexico, making this one of the worst disasters in terms of oil spills in United States history. That one was associated with BP oil. There was also one that occurred about a decade earlier by Exxon called Valdez. And so these dangers of deep water drilling are known, and they have manifested themselves in very palpable ways. Tar sands are composed of sand with shale particles coated with bitumen. This bitumen is another term for a mixture of long chain hydrocarbons. Shallow tar sands are excavated and mixed with hot water and steam to extract the bitumen that's coating the sand and the shale. The US also has large supplies of unconventional oil. Oil shales are fine-grained sedimentary rock that's found in a solid organic material like kerogen. Like the tar sands that we just talked about, the kerogen can be heated, liquefied, and pumped out like crude oil. So we have this in the United States, and this is located in most of the western part of the United States, around Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. So if these deposits could be extracted at a reasonable pace and with acceptable environmental impacts, they might yield the equivalent of several trillion barrels of oil. The mining and extracting of oil shales like tar sands, of course, you have to bring this up, it uses vast amounts of water. And knowing where these tar sands are located in the western part of the United States, water is a scarce resource there. So we always have to balance use of water and other resources to what is potentially going to be extracted or produced. Do the benefits outweigh the cost? Here we have a video about the Alberta tar sands. They're now the biggest single source of oil for the United States. But of course, water pollution, forest destruction, and energy uses to liquefy the sticky tar are among the many costs of extracting this source of oil.
Oil companies want to build pipelines across America to carry tar sand crude from Canada to our coasts. The truth is, these proposed pipelines won't bring oil to America, they bring oil through America. The asphalt-like tar sands are mined from Canada's northern boreal forest. Oil companies have to heat the tar sands with toxic additives, generating massive greenhouse gas pollution and dumping cancer-causing chemicals into the air and water. Tar sands is the dirtiest oil on Earth. The heavy tar sands crude is pumped at extreme pressures and temperatures. On top of that, sand and chemicals in the mixture corrode steel. An existing U.S. tar sands pipeline spilled 12 times in its first 12 months of operation. That's a spill a month. Spills pollute waterways and critical underground aquifers, and can put crops in the drinking water for millions of Americans at risk. Oil companies use legal intimidation to force dangerous pipelines on landowners who don't want them. The Canadian tar sands crude is destined for U.S. coastal refineries, releasing more cancer-causing chemicals. The fuel would be largely exported overseas. Americans take on all the risks, while oil companies collect all the rewards. Huge profits the big oil uses to buy more influence in Washington, D.C. Moving America beyond oil isn't that difficult. With smart transportation choices, including vehicles powered by clean, advanced technology, we can achieve real energy independence, long-term national security, and create jobs. We need to draw the line at tar sands. The world's dirtiest oil isn't welcome here.
So that was about the Alberta tar sands, which is located in Canada. But here's another video just about the general process of extraction.
The OSP mining, extraction, and operating process is unique and complex, and this is how it actually works. Before the oil sands can be mined, the layers of muskeg, rock, and soil known as overburden are cleared away and stored for later reclamation use. Giant shovels measuring 7 stories each, with a large bucket that scoops up to 100 metric tons of oil-soaked dirt in a single load, pick up the oil sands ore and drop it into a series of gigantic heavy hauler trucks. Each 400-ton truck carries enough bitumen to make about 200 barrels of oil and can make 30 to 50 trips each shift. The trucks dump the oil sands into 2 massive primary crushers. Inside the crushers, huge steel teeth break up and grind the large chunks of ore down to about 16 inches or 45 centimeters. Each double roll crusher can process 14,000 tons of oil sands ore per hour. The ore is then carried along the world's largest capacity conveyor belt to a storage silo. There, ore is fed up 3 conveyors to the rotary drum breakers, where warm water is added and the rotating drums agitated vigorously, creating a mixture called slurry. The slurry is then moved through a 2-kilometer pipeline to the extraction plant, a process known as hydrotransport. The slurry sloshes along inside the pipeline, and the movement further agitates the bitumen, beginning the separation process. After hydrotransport, the slurry enters the primary separation cell, the first stage of bitumen extraction. The cells stand out as large cones against the backdrop of the buildings and pipe racks of the plant. When the slurry enters the separation cells, water is added to help separate out the bitumen. In the cell, the bitumen floats to the top of the vessel, the sand sinks to the bottom, and a combination of mostly water mixed with sand, bitumen, and clay sits in the middle. These are known as middlings, which are treated again to recover more bitumen. The product from extraction is known as froth and typically consists of 60% bitumen, 30% water, and 10% solids. In the froth treatment plant, the froth is mixed with a paraffinic solvent that reduces viscosity and precipitates asphaltenes. The result is a water and solids-free bitumen, clean enough to be upgraded using hydrogen addition technology. This mixture of bitumen and paraffinic solvent, or diluent, is called dilbit. The dilbit is shipped 493 kilometers south to the Scotford upgrader through the corridor pipeline. Light oils that are part of the bitumen received from the mine are first separated, including the diluent that is used to transport the bitumen to the upgrader. The remaining residue, a tar-like fluid from the bitumen, is upgraded by applying heat, hydrogen, and pressure to break the large carbon chains that make up a bitumen molecule. Upgrading methods create lighter hydrocarbon molecules by either removing carbon or adding hydrogen molecules to the long bitumen molecule chain. Shell uses the hydrogen addition process. In a vessel called a hydrocracker, hydrogen is added to create smaller hydrocarbon molecules that are easier for refineries to process. Most of the hydrogen used for hydrocracking is produced on-site by a hydrogen manufacturing unit. The byproduct created is then converted to pure sulfur in the sulfur recovery unit. The hydrogen addition process has some advantages over the traditional coking process used at other oil sand operations. Coking removes carbon, creating a waste byproduct. Shell's method adds hydrogen to produce approximately 103 barrels of upgraded crude oil from every 100 barrels of bitumen processed. This volume processing gain is a significant advantage over coking, which delivers only 85 barrels of crude for every 100 barrels processed. It's a volume advantage of over 18%. Shell's synthetic crude products are then sent to refineries, including Shell's Scotford refinery next door, where the oil is turned into a variety of high-quality fuels that people use every day.